News swept through the kingdom. Prince Jahabari, a renowned traveler with a reputation for kindness, was visiting the palace. Tall and graceful, he was known as much for his fair judgment as for his charm. Excitement rippled among the royal court, with each family vying to impress him. Lulama, however, remained hidden in the shadows, too accustomed to her family's cruelty to believe anyone could see beyond her exterior. Little did she know, destiny was setting a stage for her, one that would change her life in ways she never dared to imagine. Princess Lulama was unlike anyone in her family. Her skewed eyes, a feature that should have drawn compassion, instead marked her as different, a difference her royal family viewed with disdain. Even her clothes, always faded and ill-fitted, seemed to echo her outsider status. While her sisters donned rich fabrics and precious jewels, Lulama was often left with torn garments, as if her royal title was a mere formality. The laughter of her peers echoed like knives, and even her own father avoided her gaze. But within, Lulama held a quiet resilience, a flame untouched by the coldness surrounding her. Lulama was no stranger to cruel whispers, but none hurt as deeply as the barbs from her younger sister, Nomasando. "Even beggars dress better than you," Nomasando would mock, ensuring her taunts reached every corner of the palace. The royal family's indifference turned these wounds into scars, each word reinforcing that Lulama's differences made her unworthy of love. The king himself seemed to believe she was a stain on the royal image. Lulama endured it all in silence, yet in her heart, a small voice whispered of a place, somewhere beyond the palace walls, where kindness might exist. The palace gardens became Lulama's refuge, her escape from the harsh eyes of her family. There, among fragrant flowers and the gentle rustling of leaves, she found solace. Birds chirped around her, and squirrels scurried close, sensing her gentle heart. They, unlike anyone else, did not judge her appearance. Here she poured out her pain, whispering her dreams to the wind and finding comfort in the presence of her animal friends. She longed for a life where she could be valued for her spirit, not her appearance. For now, the garden was her kingdom, a sanctuary all her own. It was an ordinary afternoon when Lulama crossed paths with Prince Jahabari in the gardens. She froze, her heart pounding as he looked at her, not with scorn, but with gentle curiosity. "Are you often alone out here?" he asked, his voice warm. Lulama was shocked by his genuine interest. Despite her shyness, she felt a spark, a connection she had never known before. They spoke in hushed tones, their words weaving an unspoken understanding. For the first time, someone had seen her without judgment. The garden, once her only solace, had now become a place of hope. Nomasando's sharp eyes caught the exchange between Lulama and Jhabari, her curiosity quickly turning to envy. How could this peculiar sister of hers, so strange and awkward, attract the attention of such a man? It didn't take long for Nomasando to decide that Prince Jahabari's affections should belong to her. She approached him with all the grace and charm she could muster, flashing her brightest smile. She complimented his travels and laughed at his every word, yet she noticed something unsettling. Jahabari's gaze kept drifting to the garden, as if looking for someone else. Nomasando's jealousy boiled, fueling a dangerous resolve. Lulama had never experienced such attention, let alone from someone like Jhabari. He sought her out often, catching her in quiet moments in the gardens, where they spoke of the world beyond the palace. Jhabari was fascinated by her gentle nature, and she found herself smiling in his presence, though she feared he might only be toying with her. Doubt plagued her heart. Why would someone like him, so admired and confident, show interest in someone like her? Each meeting left her torn, a mix of happiness and dread. Happiness for his kindness, and dread that it might all be a cruel illusion. Servants began whispering about the prince's attention toward Lulama, their voices carrying through the palace halls. "Can you believe it? The prince is spending time with her," they said in hushed tones. The rumors reached Nomasando's ears, deepening her resentment, and even the king began to take notice, displeased and confused. He couldn't understand why a noble prince would prefer his least favored daughter. The tension grew like a storm, its shadow spreading over the palace. For Lulama, the weight of the rumors was unbearable. Her quiet moments with Jhabari now felt laden with the eyes of everyone around her. Lulama's heart ached with confusion. She lays awake, staring at the flickering shadows cast by her dim candle. Could Jhabari truly see something in her? Or was he simply amused by her oddity? Her mind raced with painful memories of mockery, the cruel words of her family replaying like echoes. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from what felt like an inevitable heartbreak. But each time she thought of his kind smile and his steady gaze, hope stirred within her. What if, she wondered, he really does care? But fear held her captive, casting shadows on her dreams. The king finally summoned Jhabari, his tone cold and clipped. "You should know," he said, barely masking his disdain, "that Lulama is different. Her flaws are many, and she's hardly fit for a prince's affections." Jhabari listened in silence, his jaw tightening. He couldn't believe the king would speak of his own daughter this way. "With respect, your majesty," Jhabari replied, his voice steady. "I see her heart, her kindness, a rare beauty." The king's eyes narrowed in warning, but Jhabari didn't waver. His defense of Lulama sent a ripple through the palace, fueling resentment, jealousy, and a quiet sense of rebellion. Namasando could no longer bear the idea of Jhabari's attention slipping away to her sister. Lulama's awkwardness, her unusual appearance, none of it should have won him over. Namasando's mind whirled with ways to separate them, each plan more malicious than the last. She watched Lulama closely, waiting for any opportunity to twist the prince's view of her. If she could tear her sister down, Namasando thought with a smile, she could raise herself higher. Thus, a silent but determined resolve was born within her heart, fueled by envy and ambition. Namasando started whispering lies about Lulama, spinning tales that painted her as cunning and selfish, eager to manipulate Jhabari's affections for her own gain. Her words found receptive ears among the palace staff, who passed them along eagerly. "Did you hear?" they murmured. "Princess Lulama is trying to trap the prince." Each false word twisted perceptions of Lulama, and soon suspicion clouded Jhabari's view of her. Namasando's poison was slow but very strong, planting seeds of doubt that took root in the fertile soil of palace gossip. In his heart, the king was convinced that Jhabari's affection belonged to Namasando. Believing Lulama unworthy, he called Namasando to his chambers and revealed his plan. They would compel Jhabari to propose to her, using every royal force at their disposal. Namasando's eyes sparkled as her father spoke, her ambitions finally aligning with his. Together, they forged a path that would not only secure Namasando's future, but also cast Lulama into deeper isolation. The palace's shadows grew longer as the plot thickened, a betrayal hidden under the guise of royal duty. The weight of conflicting tales left Jhabari torn, struggling to reconcile his growing feelings for Lulama with the damaging stories circulating through the palace. Every gentle gesture, every quiet word she had shared with him, suddenly seemed fraught with hidden motives. And with the king's pressure to marry Namasando intensifying, Jhabari found himself at a crossroads. He was drawn to Lulama's quiet strength, yet his trust was diminished. Was she truly the woman he thought she was, he wondered, or had he been deceived? Despite the uncertainty, Jhabari couldn't deny his feelings for Lulama. He found her in the gardens one evening, alone under a canopy of stars, her gaze distant. In a hushed voice, he confessed his love, promising to make her his bride regardless of the pressures around them. Lulama's heart swelled with joy and disbelief, but she dared not let herself hope too fully. Still, they shared a moment of unbreakable connection, a fragile joy that flickered like a candle against the winds of doubt and deception. But Namasando had followed them to the garden, lurking just beyond sight. When she heard Jhabari's promise, fury ignited within her. How could her sister, the neglected one, dare claim the love of a prince? Namasando vowed in that moment to crush Lulama's happiness. Slipping away unseen, she crafted a new scheme, more ruthless than the last. If Lulama wanted love, Namasando would make sure it was torn from her grasp. The following day, Namasando spread a new rumor, a fabricated tale of Herb's secret engagement to Jhabari. Servants carried the news like wildfire, and soon, the entire kingdom buzzed with talk of a royal wedding. Namasando ensured that her story reached Jhabari before he could clear up the misunderstanding, and with the king's support, the pressure mounted for him to go through with the sham engagement. Lulama watched in horror, the beautiful dream she'd cherished crumbling before her eyes. For Lulama, the news struck like a blade to her heart. She couldn't believe that Jhabari, her only source of kindness, would betray her so cruelly. Tears filled her eyes as she retreated to her chambers, each step heavier than the last. She realized, with a bitter certainty, that she was truly alone. That night, she wept silently, feeling her heart fracture, each sob echoing her shattered dreams. Jhabari was trapped, his voice lost amid the loud declarations of his engagement to Namasando. The king himself arranged a formal announcement, stifling any chance Jhabari had to protest. Helpless to explain the truth to Lulama, he could only watch as she withdrew, her once vibrant spirit dulled by sorrow. Each moment weighed on him, a chain of deceit binding his honor and leaving him a prisoner to the royal family's ambitions. Heartbroken and weary, Lulama could no longer endure the palace's torment. She fled one night, slipping out of the palace gates under the cover of darkness, leaving behind the cold halls and empty promises. She carried only the remnants of her shattered heart and the faint hope of finding peace beyond the palace walls. With each step, the kingdom grew smaller behind her, yet the shadows of her pain followed, whispering that her journey was far from over. With no clear path, she wandered through fields and villages, her once sparkly garments now stained and torn. The sun was unforgiving, the roads harsh and barren. Hunger troubled her belly, and the ache of loneliness grew with each mile. Yet her spirit held on, a flicker of resilience lighting her way forward. She would survive even if survival felt like a small victory. In a small village, Lulama hoped for kindness, but the locals turned her away, recoiling from her appearance. Their suspicious glances and muttered words reminded her painfully of her family's disdain. Her heart sank as she realized the world's cruelty extended beyond palace walls. Her journey would be harder than she had imagined. Exhausted and desperate, Lulama stumbled upon an abandoned shack on the edge of a pig farm. She found its owner, a rough woman named Majuma, who reluctantly agreed to let her stay in exchange for work. The shelter was meager, the conditions brutal, but Lulama clung to this small refuge, determined to endure whatever came. Each day, Lulama walked through mud and filth, her hands blistered from laboring with the pigs. The work was humiliating, yet she bit back her pride. Even as the unpleasant smell and grime overwhelmed her, she pushed on, vowing never to let her spirit be crushed. Her hands grew calloused, her resolve unbreakable. Her little wages barely afforded food, forcing Lulama to scavenge scraps, sometimes even sharing meals with the pigs she tended. Each bite was a reminder of her fall from royalty, yet it only hardened her will. She would survive, no matter what indignities she endured. Her strength became a quiet, defiant flame that refused to be extinguished. Other workers laughed at her mean appearance, calling her pig princess and taunting at her skewed eyes. Though their cruelty stung, Lulama endured in silence, each insult a lesson in resilience. She would not bend to their mockery. She was learning to carry her burdens with dignity, even as the weight of her past remained. One evening, a small girl approached her, offering a loaf of bread and cool water. The girl whispered, "I've heard of you, the princess with kind eyes." The simple kindness touched Lulama deeply, a comfort to her weary soul. Not everyone, she realized, judged her harshly. There were those who saw beyond her appearance, and this thought filled her with hope. Lulama began leaving extra food for the pigs, finding solace in their gentle responses. She cared for them as she once had for her beloved garden animals, and in return, they seemed to recognize her kindness. The animals became her silent companions, reminders of a time when she hadn't been so alone. Majuma grew suspicious of Lulama's secret kindness, accusing her of theft. Frightened, Lulama slipped away into the night, knowing she could no longer stay. With the darkness as her guide, she disappeared, casting her fate once more into the unknown. She walked on, her hope wavering yet her resolve steadfast. Lulama spent a night alone in the forest, the sounds of distant animals filling the air. She lay on the cold ground, her body weary and her spirit fragile. Yet, as she gazed at the stars above, she felt a strange calm wash over her, a reminder that the universe held more mysteries and miracles than she could comprehend. She drifted to sleep, cradled by the vastness around her. At dawn, Lulama awoke to the sound of soft footsteps. A hunter, a man named Vuzamuzi, had stumbled upon her while foraging. Noticing her ragged state, he offered her food and shelter, sensing her silent strength despite her unkempt appearance. Though cautious, Lulama accepted his kindness, her heart touched by his quiet, unassuming nature. In Vuzamuzi's modest hut, deep in the forest, Lulama found a haven where she could begin to heal. She spent her days learning survival skills, gathering herbs and strengthening her body. The forest became her refuge, its silence a comfort for her troubled soul. Slowly, she began to regain a sense of inner peace. Lulama's work in the forest strengthened her both physically and mentally. She learned to track animals, recognize healing plants, and fend for herself. With each skill mastered, her confidence grew. She was no longer the princess in need of protection, but a woman of resilience and fortitude, carving out her own path. Though she tried to push the past aside, thoughts of Jhabari occasionally crept in. She wondered if he had truly loved her, or if she had been just another pawn in the royal game. The forest gave her time to reflect, to come to terms with her lost love and release the hold it had on her heart. One day, Vuzamuzi invited her to a nearby village festival, a gathering that celebrated the end of harvest. Lulama felt a pang of excitement. For the first time since leaving the palace, she donned simple but clean garments and entered the village. Amidst the laughter and dancing, she felt a hint of joy return to her heart. Back at the palace, Namasando's conscience began to trouble her. Though she'd gained her father's favor and public attention, she found herself haunted by memories of her sister's innocence. Jhabari's cool indifference toward her only intensified her sense of hollowness. The palace's luxuries now felt meaningless, tainted by her betrayal. As whispers of a mysterious woman living in the forest reached the palace, Jhabari couldn't ignore the possibility that it might be Lulama. Torn between loyalty to his title and his yearning to see her again, he made a bold choice to search for her, hoping to mend the rift caused by lies and misunderstandings. Vuzamuzi sensed a change in Lulama. Her occasional glances toward the distant kingdom betrayed a lingering attachment to her past. Gently, he warned her of the dangers of returning, of the cycle of heartbreak and betrayal that palace life often brought. But Lulama's heart hesitated, conflicted between her growing bond with Vuzamuzi and her unresolved feelings for Jhabari. One evening, as dusk settled over the forest, Jhabari finally found Lulama's refuge. His appearance shocked her, the memories rushing back with painful clarity. He spoke of his regret, of the palace's lies, and begged for her forgiveness. But Lulama, now a different woman, remained guarded, her heart distrustful of reopening old wounds. Vuzamuzi watched the reunion from afar, his heart heavy with unease. He could see the prince's love for Lulama, but he also sensed the disruption it would bring to the peace they had built together. For the first time, Vuzamuzi felt jealousy, a sharp reminder that he had, perhaps, come to care for Lulama more deeply than he'd realized. Lulama sat with Jhabari, listening to his tale of palace deceit and regret. As he poured out his heart, she felt her anger soften but could not ignore the scars left by their separation. When he confessed his love, Lulama felt a flicker of warmth, yet something held her back. Could she trust him again? She wondered. When Jhabari left, Vuzamuzi shared his feelings with Lulama, confessing his own love and devotion. He offered her a life of simplicity and honesty, a stark contrast to the palace's grand promises. Torn between her past and present, Lulama realized she faced a choice: the familiar appeal of royal life or the unfamiliar future Vuzimuzi promised. Unable to decide, she proposed a test. She would return to the palace to face her family and her past, but only if both men were willing to prove their devotion. The challenge tested not only their love for her but their own courage and intentions. Jhabari accepted immediately, eager to redeem himself, while Vuzimuzi, though reluctant, agreed as well. Returning to the palace was both bizarre and painful. Lulama faced cold, unwelcoming stares, but held her head high. Her father's surprise quickly turned to anger, and Namasando's guilt was evident. Jhabari and Vuzimuzi stood by her side as she demanded the truth behind her exile. In that moment, she vowed to reclaim her place, not as a princess, but as a woman of dignity. Namasando, overcome with remorse, finally admitted her lies and begged Lulama's forgiveness. The apology was long overdue, and though Lulama felt the weight of her sister's betrayal, she extended forgiveness. The moment marked a turning point, as both sisters acknowledged the pain they'd caused and the bond they had nearly lost. Her father, faced with the truth, was forced to recognize his role in Lulama's suffering. Shamed but proud of her newfound strength, he reluctantly blessed her union with whichever man she chose, finally valuing her happiness over royal alliances. Lulama felt a sense of vindication and closure, though she knew her path was still uncertain. Lulama chose Vuzimuzi, realizing his loyalty and simplicity matched the woman she had become. Though Jhabari was hurt, he respected her decision and pledged his lifelong friendship. As the palace buzzed with the news, Lulama left with Vuzimuzi, embracing a future of authenticity and love, free from the palace's chains. Together, Lulama and Vuzimuzi returned to the forest, where they built a life of hard work, trust and joy. She found fulfillment in the quiet rhythms of nature, discovering a profound peace that palace life could never provide. What do you think the future holds for this couple? Tell us what you think in the comments section. Share this video, like it, and of course subscribe to the channel.